My name is Evelyn Rose Carter, and for most of my life, I existed like an apology no one had asked for. I learned early how to move quietly through a house that never quite felt like mine. How to close doors without sound. How to clean up messes that weren't mine. How to smile in ways that made adults comfortable and never ask questions that would make them look at me too closely. In the Carter household, love was conditional. Approval was rationed. And silence was safety. I was adopted when I was 2 years old. That was the version of the story I was told. Anyway, they never spoke about it like it was a blessing. It was presented more like an inconvenience they had agreed to tolerate. You were lucky, my adoptive mother Marla Carter liked to say. You could have ended up anywhere. I believed her. The night everything cracked open began like dozens of others, quiet tension wrapped in routine. It was my adoptive father Richard Carter's birthday. 6-2. A number he wore like a badge of authority, as if age alone entitled him to reverence. I stood in the kitchen stirring shrimp and grits, my shoulders tight, my pulse too fast for such a simple task. Steam fogged my glasses. Butter sizzled in the pan. The pressure cooker hissed behind me like a warning I didn't know how to interpret. I wanted tonight to go right. I always wanted things to go right. Evelyn. Marla's voice slid through the room, light and amused. The sound made my stomach knot before she even finished the sentence. What is that supposed to be? I turned, spoon in hand. The grits, I said. They just need a little more time to thicken. She laughed. Not a chuckle. Not a giggle. A laugh meant to be heard. That's soup, she said loudly. Even Clara knows better. Clara, my younger sister, their biological daughter, sat at the breakfast nook swinging her legs. She was 14, sharp-eyed, already learning how to read the room the way I had. Her cheeks flushed pink. I think it looks okay, she muttered. Richard didn't look up from his recliner. He took a long drink from his beer. Didn't we show you how to make that years ago? He said. I was 12, I replied quietly. That was my mistake. Richard scoffed. Excuses. Marla wiped imaginary tears from her eyes, still laughing. Honestly, Evie, you managed to mess up the easiest things. I swallowed. I told myself it was just dinner. Just words. That I could get through it like I always did. By shrinking. Then Richard said it. Why did we even keep you? The words dropped into the room like broken glass. The mixer stopped. The pressure cooker hissed once and fell silent. Even the clock on the wall seemed too loud. Clara gasped. Dad, she whispered. Richard didn't look at me. Didn't need to. He tossed the bottle cap into the sink and leaned back in his chair. I felt something inside my chest tear, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. You didn't just say that, I whispered. He shrugged. Marla was smiling. That was the moment I understood something I'd spent years trying not to see. They didn't just tolerate my pain. They enjoyed it. I've never belonged here, I said, my voice shaking but strong enough to surprise even me. And you've made sure I never forgot that. Marla's smile vanished. Watch your mouth, she snapped. You don't talk to your parents that way. You're not my parents, I said. The words tasted like blood and freedom all at once. You're people who needed to feel generous. And I was the proof. Clara stood up, tears spilling down her face. Evie, please. I dropped the spoon. It clattered against the tile like punctuation. I'm done trying, I said. Cook your own dinner. I pulled off the apron and walked out the back door before anyone could stop me. The night air hit me like a wall, thick, humid, heavy with the scent of summer grass and distant rain. I welcomed it. It didn't judge me. I walked barefoot down the porch steps, the wood still warm from the day, and kept going. Past the trimmed hedges. Past the mailbox Richard repainted every spring like appearances could cover rot. I didn't cry. Not yet. I walked until the house disappeared behind trees and shadows, until the streetlights came on one by one like they were escorting me away. I sat on the curb 2 houses down and hugged my knees to my chest. That's when the truth finally caught up to me. It wasn't the grits. It was never the grits. It was 21 years of being reminded I was extra. Replaceable. Temporary. A guest who overstayed her welcome. Evie. The voice cut through the fog. I looked up and blinked against the bright white glow of the bookstore sign across the street. Lucas Hale stood there with a paper bag in one hand and keys in the other. He worked at the bookstore most evenings and somehow always smelled faintly of coffee and ink. He crossed the street quickly when he saw my face. He crouched beside me, careful, like I was something fragile. What happened? I tried to answer. Instead, I laughed. Then I cried. The sound that came out of me was ugly, raw, unfiltered, years overdue. Lucas didn't interrupt, didn't rush. He just sat there and waited until I could breathe again. He asked why they kept me, I said finally, like I was something they forgot to return. Lucas's jaw tightened. That's not okay, he said quietly. That's not normal. I shrugged. It is for them. He handed me the paper bag. Peach pie, he said, slightly squashed. Honest food. That did it. I laughed through tears and pressed the bag to my chest like it was an anchor. You don't deserve that house, he said. You never did. For the first time that night, I believed someone. When I walked back toward the neighborhood later, my chest still aching but steadier, something felt wrong. The street was too quiet. Halfway down the block, a sleek black car idled with its lights off. No plates I could see. No sound beyond a low, controlled hum. It didn't belong there. I slowed. The driver's window rolled down. I ran. My heart slammed against my ribs as I bolted up the driveway. The pie burst through the bottom of the bag and splattered onto the concrete, but I didn't stop. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and slid down against the wood, gasping. When I looked back through the window, the car was gone. I told myself it was nothing. But deep down, something cold had already wrapped around my spine. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Richard's words echoing like a curse. Why did we even keep you? I opened my nightstand drawer and pulled out the velvet box I'd hidden there for weeks. Inside was a watch, sleek, silver, understated. I'd worked extra shifts, skipped meals, walked instead of taking the bus to afford it. A birthday gift. Hope is stubborn like that. I wrapped it carefully and told myself tomorrow might be different. Tomorrow might be better. I didn't know yet that tomorrow would destroy everything I had left. The next afternoon arrived dressed like a lie. Sunlight spilled across the Carter backyard, bright and forgiving, as if the house hadn't swallowed someone whole the night before. North Carolina spring leaned toward summer early that year. Humidity clinging to skin, cicadas already rehearsing for evening. I stood in my bedroom staring at myself in the mirror, wearing the lavender dress Clara had chosen that morning. You look kind, she'd said, smoothing the fabric with careful hands. No one had ever described me that way before. I held on to that word as I walked downstairs, gift bag clutched against my ribs like it could protect me. The yard was already full. Folding chairs dotted the lawn. Neighbors laughed too loudly. Family members I barely knew hugged Richard like he was some local hero. Marla floated through it all with a pitcher of lemonade and her polished smile, the one that told the world she was generous, warm, admired. Richard stood at the grill, beer in one hand, tongs in the other, a king in his chosen kingdom. 6-2 never looked better, someone called. Richard grinned. He loved that part. Loved being seen. I hovered near the edge of the patio, invisible as usual, waiting for a moment that never seemed to come. Every time he turned away from the grill, someone filled the space. A joke. A story. A laugh at his expense that he pretended to tolerate. The gift bag grew heavier in my hands. Evelyn, Marla called brightly, slicing through the noise. Why don't you give your father his present now, before the cake? Every head turned. My stomach dropped. I met Clara's eyes across the yard. She nodded once, small and encouraging. So I walked. Each step across the lawn felt deliberate, exposed. The grass pressed cool and damp against my sandals. The chatter softened, not silent, but attentive in that way crowds get when they sense something delicate might break. Hey, I said when I reached him. Happy birthday. Richard looked at me like he'd forgotten I existed. Oh, yeah. I held out the bag. I got you something. He raised an eyebrow. You did. I nodded. I've been saving. That was a mistake too. He took the bag, already distracted, and pulled the tissue paper aside with the enthusiasm of a man expecting disappointment. When he opened the box, the watch caught the sun. Clean lines, polished steel, quiet elegance. For half a second, something flickered across his face. Surprise. Then contempt snapped into place like a reflex. This what you wasted your money on, he said loudly. A hush fell. He held the watch up, squinting at it. Some cheap knockoff. My chest tightened. It's not a knockoff, I said quickly. It's real. I worked extra shifts. He didn't let me finish. He tossed the box. Just like that. It arced through the air and landed in the grass with a dull thud, disappearing between blades like it never mattered. What kind of worthless junk is this? Richard barked. You think I'm going to wear plastic? A gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone muttered, Jesus. Marla froze near the drinks table, her mouth parting, but she said nothing. Not a word. Clara's hands balled into fists at her sides. Her face went white. I can get the receipt, I stammered. It's stainless steel. I said I don't want it, Richard snapped. Save your pennies for something useful next time. Time slowed. I felt the heat rush to my face, my ears ringing with the sound of humiliation too loud to ignore. Every eye was on me now, not curious, not kind, judging. I didn't bend to pick up the watch. I didn't argue. I turned and walked inside. The stairs blurred beneath my feet. I made it to my room before the tears came. Hot, relentless, shaking their way out of me like they'd been waiting years for permission. I didn't hear the cake come out. Didn't hear them sing. Didn't hear anyone ask where I'd gone. At some point, the laughter outside softened, shifted, moved on. People always did. The house eventually quieted, settling into that hollow stillness that followed performances. That was when I stood up. My body felt wrong, too tight, too loose, like my skin didn't belong to me anymore. I pulled on a hoodie, shoved my keys into my pocket, and walked out the front door barefoot. No plan. Just escape. The pavement was still warm beneath my feet. Sprinklers whispered across lawns. Street lights stretched my shadow long and unfamiliar behind me. I walked. One block. Then another. Richard's voice echoed in my head, sharp and clear. Worthless junk. Someone who doesn't know her place. The road curved at the edge of a neighborhood, trees thickening into darkness beyond the bend. I slowed. That's when I heard it. The engine. Low. Controlled. Too smooth. I turned. The black car sat across the street, headlights off. Waiting. The back door opened. Two men stepped out, tall, broad, moving with quiet precision that made my blood run cold. I stepped back. They stepped forward. I turned to run, but gravel slipped under my feet. I barely made it 2 strides before hands clamped down on my arms, hard, unyielding. Let me go. I screamed. One of them pressed something cold against my ribs, not a blade, but a promise. The hood went over my head. The world vanished. I fought, kicked, twisted, screamed, but the night swallowed the sound whole. The car door opened. I was shoved inside. Leather. Cold. Silence. The door slammed. The engine pulled us forward. And just like that, I was gone. Inside the car, fear pressed in from every direction. My wrists weren't bound, but it didn't matter. The men on either side of me sat rigid, eyes forward, as if I were cargo instead of a person. Where are you taking me? I whispered. No answer. My breath came shallow. My thoughts spiraled. I don't have money, I said, panic sharpening my voice. If this is ransom, you've got the wrong person. They won't pay for me. The man to my right flinched, just slightly. That scared me more than silence. Please, I whispered. Just tell me why. No one did. The car slowed after what felt like hours. Gravel crunched beneath the tires. Gates opened without a sound. When the hood finally came off, I stared at something unreal. An estate rose before me, columns, glowing windows, manicured hedges cut with surgical precision. The air smelled like jasmine and something old. Expensive. I was guided up marble steps, bare feet burning against stone. The door opened. A tall man with silver-streaked hair stood in the light, his expression calm, almost careful. Hello, Evelyn, he said gently. I froze. I know this is overwhelming, he continued, but I need you to hear this. He met my eyes. I'm your biological father. The world tilted. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. I'm your biological father. The words didn't land all at once. They arrived in pieces, slow, sharp fragments that cut as they settled. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. My legs felt hollow, like they might fold if I trusted them with my weight. That's not possible, I finally said, though my voice sounded far away, like it belonged to someone else. I would have known. They would have told me. The man, Alexander Pierce, I would later learn, didn't argue. He didn't rush to convince me. He simply nodded, as if disbelief were the most reasonable response in the world. They should have, he said quietly. But they didn't. The men who'd brought me here stepped back, disappearing into the edges of the room like shadows with jobs to do elsewhere. The door closed behind them with a soft, final click. Alexander gestured inward. Please, come inside. You don't have to believe me yet. Just let me explain. Every instinct I had screamed run. But another part of me, the part that had watched a stranger's car idle in the dark, the part that had felt unseen for 21 years, leaned forward instead. I followed him. The house didn't feel like a house. It felt like a museum designed to look lived in. High ceilings, polished floors, warm light that didn't flicker or hum. No creaks, no clutter, no reminders of arguments echoing through hallways. I stood there barefoot and shaking in the entryway, painfully aware of my wrinkled dress, my hoodie, the faint smell of grass and sweat clinging to me like evidence. I'm sorry about how you were brought here, Alexander said. It wasn't how I wanted this to happen. You had me kidnapped. I snapped, fear bleeding into anger now that shock had loosened its grip. His jaw tightened. I had you protected, he said carefully. There was reason to believe you were in danger. I laughed once, sharp and brittle. From who? My parents. His eyes flickered, not surprise, but recognition. Yes, he said. That stopped me. He studied my face the way people study paintings they're afraid to touch. Like he was trying to memorize me without scaring me away. Before you say anything else, he continued, I want to show you something. He led me down a long hallway and stopped in front of a massive, gold-framed mirror. Stand here, he said. I hesitated, then stepped forward. And there it was, my face. But not alone. Standing beside me, reflected back in glass and light, was a man with my chin, my cheekbones, the slight downward tilt of my left eye, even the faint crease between the brows I'd always hated. It felt like staring at myself 10 years in the future, if I'd been allowed to grow into someone confident. Someone certain. My throat closed. I've been looking for you for over 20 years, Alexander said softly. I knew the moment I saw you that night on the street. There was no doubt. I shook my head. You don't get to say that. You don't get to show up now and rewrite everything. I'm not rewriting, he replied. I'm restoring. He handed me a thick manila envelope. You don't have to open it yet. But everything you've ever wondered about where you came from, it's in there. My hands trembled as I took it. I already have parents, I said weakly. They raised me. They housed you, he corrected gently. There's a difference. Something inside me bristled at the truth of that. The study was warm in a way the rest of the house wasn't. Soft lamps, leather chairs that creaked when you moved, shelves packed with books that looked touched, not decorative. Alexander poured tea, not coffee, and set a cup in front of me like I might need something to hold on to. My wife doesn't live here anymore, he said. It's just me. I didn't ask why. He sat across from me, folded his hands, and waited until my breathing slowed. Your mother's name was Camille Laurent, he began. She was brilliant, stubborn, had a laugh that filled rooms and a habit of humming while she cooked. My heart stumbled. I used to dream about someone like that, I whispered before I could stop myself. I thought I made her up. His eyes softened painfully. You didn't. He told me everything. How they'd met during a research program overseas. How he'd been called back unexpectedly when his father fell ill. How letters crossed oceans too slowly. How Camille went into labor alone. She died during childbirth, he said quietly. Complications. I didn't know until weeks later. The room felt too small. She never listed me on the birth certificate, he continued. She didn't want my career destroyed. She thought she was protecting me. My chest burned. And me? I asked. You were taken into the system almost immediately, he said. By the time I returned and found out, the adoption was already underway. Quiet. Fast. Wrong. He looked down at his hands. I fought it, he said. I hired lawyers. Investigators. I followed paper trails that vanished mid-sentence. Every time I got close, records sealed, agencies dissolved, names changed. I clutched the envelope to my chest. So why now? I asked. Why show up like this? Because you're an adult now, he said. And because someone finally slipped. He leaned forward. They were planning to leverage you. Financially, legally, emotionally. I couldn't let that happen. I thought of Richard's sudden cruelty, of Marla's smile, of the lawsuit that hadn't happened yet, but would. I swallowed. You wanted me, I said. Alexander nodded without hesitation. I never stopped. Something inside me cracked, not painfully, but finally. I opened the envelope. Letters. Hospital records. A tiny bracelet that read Baby Girl Pierce. And a photograph, faded but alive, of a woman with dark hair laughing into the wind beside Alexander, her hands resting protectively over a rounded belly. They looked like the beginning of something that had never been allowed to finish. Tears slid down my face silently. I wasn't a mistake, I whispered. No, he said firmly. You were stolen. That night, I slept in a guest room with windows taller than doors and sheets that smelled like clean linen instead of resignation. For the first time in my life, no one yelled. No one sighed at my presence. No one reminded me how much space I took up. In the morning, sunlight poured in like it had been waiting for me. And downstairs, someone had made breakfast. Not because they had to, because they expected me to be there. I woke up expecting to feel like an intruder. That was my default state, waiting for the moment someone would notice I didn't belong and ask me to justify my existence. Instead, I woke to sunlight and silence that didn't press in on me. No footsteps pacing above my head. No raised voices drifting through vents. No tension humming beneath the air. Just quiet. The good kind. When I finally went downstairs, Alexander was already in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, reading the paper like it was any other morning. He looked up when he saw me and smiled, an easy, unforced expression that didn't flicker when I met his eyes. Good morning, he said. You hungry? I nodded before I could overthink it. Breakfast was pancakes and fruit and something warm settling into my chest that had nothing to do with food. No one commented on how much I ate. No one joked about waste. No one told me I was lucky. After we ate, Alexander reached into a drawer and slid a key across the marble counter. It was silver. Heavy. Real. What's this? I asked. A condo, he said simply. In Charlotte. Close to my office. Fully furnished. I stared at him. I don't need a condo. You need space, he replied. And a place that doesn't remind you of every way you were hurt. I swallowed. This feels like charity. It isn't, he said gently. It's an invitation. I took the key. Something inside me stood up a little straighter. I insisted on going back alone. Alexander didn't argue, just nodded, like he understood the importance of choosing for myself. I took the bus back to the Carter house. No driver. No black car. Just me. The front door was unlocked, as always. Marla stood in the kitchen wiping counters that were already clean. Well, she said without looking at me. Look who decided to crawl back. I'm here to get my things, I replied calmly. She laughed, bitter and sharp. Of course you are. Run off with your rich savior and suddenly you've got backbone. I didn't rise to it. You think he loves you, she continued. Men like that don't love. They collect. I met her eyes. That's funny. That's exactly how you treated me. Her face twisted. We gave you a home. You gave me control disguised as generosity, I said. And I don't owe you gratitude for surviving it.
Her voice rose.
You ungrateful little.
No, I cut in.
I'm just done being your scapegoat. Upstairs, my room looked smaller than I remembered.
Like it had been shrinking around me for years.
I packed quickly. Clothes, books, the watch from the lawn. I left behind the things that only existed to remind me who they wanted me to be. When I came back down, Marla stood blocking the door. You walk out now, she hissed. Don't expect to walk back in. I met her gaze, calm and steady. I won't, I said. And don't expect to be the victim in this story.
You used me.
That's over.
I walked past her. This time, I didn't look back.
3 days later, the lawsuit arrived.
Unlawful removal of a dependent. Kidnapping.
Manipulation. I stared at the letter in my new condo. White walls, clean air, silence that felt earned.
They're scared, Alexander said calmly.
People like that always are when they lose control.
The courtroom was colder than I expected. Marla wore navy and pearls.
Richard smirked like he'd already won. They painted themselves as generous parents betrayed by money and lies. Then the truth walked in.
DNA results. Hospital records. Adoption discrepancies. Camille's letters.
When I took the stand, my voice didn't shake. I wasn't loved, I said. I was tolerated. The judge didn't hesitate. All claims dismissed, she said.
You didn't lose a daughter.
You threw one away. The gavel hit. And just like that, the story they'd controlled for 2 decades was over.
That night, my phone rang. Evie. Clara whispered.
Can I come stay with you? I smiled through tears.
Yes, I said.
You can. Clara arrived with a backpack that looked too small for the decision she'd just made. She stood in the doorway of my condo like she wasn't sure she was allowed to cross the threshold, like the walls might reject her the way people always had. Her hair was pulled into a loose braid, and she wore the oversized gray hoodie I'd given her last Christmas.
The sleeves swallowed her hands. I didn't say anything. I just opened my arms. She stepped into them and broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically.
Just quiet shaking breaths against my shoulder, like she'd been holding herself together with string and it finally snapped.
I thought you'd leave me, she whispered. I tightened my arms around her.
I would never. And for the first time, I wasn't promising something I couldn't keep.
We didn't talk much that first night. I ordered pizza. We ate it straight from the box on the couch. No plates. No rules.
No one telling Clara to sit up straighter or reminding her how much things cost.
She kept glancing around the condo like she was memorizing proof that this was real.
Can I stay? She asked softly, like it was a favor she didn't deserve. You already are, I said. That night, she slept in the guest room. I lay awake on the couch, listening, not for yelling, not for doors slamming, but for the quiet breathing of someone safe.
It was the most peaceful sound I'd ever known.
The next morning, we opened all the windows.
Sunlight poured in like it had somewhere important to be.
We put on music, loud, ridiculous, joyful.
Clara laughed when I tripped over a paint tarp.
We painted over the baize walls with soft greens and blues, colors that felt like fresh air.
Can I put glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling? She asked.
You can put the whole galaxy up there, I said.
She did.
We lay on the floor afterward, paint-speckled and exhausted, staring up at the stars she'd placed too close together, too crooked, too perfect. I didn't know houses could feel like this, she said. Like what? Like they want you.
Something in my chest finally healed.
Life didn't magically become easy. There were therapy appointments, late-night conversations, moments Clara flinched when voices got too loud, moments I caught myself apologizing for taking up space. But we learned. Alexander didn't hover.
He didn't demand gratitude.
He showed up, quietly, consistently, like someone who understood that trust was built, not bought. One evening, months later, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a birth certificate. Evelyn Rose Pierce. No footnote. No explanation. Just truth. I want you to choose who you are, he said. Not who they told you to be. I did. A year later, I stood on a stage beneath bright lights, looking out at a room full of faces that reminded me of who I used to be, quiet, guarded, wondering if they mattered. My name is Evelyn Pierce, I said. And for most of my life, I believed I was unwanted. The room stilled. I was told love had to be earned, that survival should be enough, that gratitude was the price of being tolerated.
I paused.
But here's the truth no one told me soon enough.
I found Clara in the front row. She smiled like she already knew.
You are not a burden. You are not an obligation. You are not the mistake. Applause rose, but I wasn't done.
Sometimes family isn't who keeps you. It's who chooses you.
And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what hurts, even when it's familiar.
The room erupted.
I stood there, steady, not as someone rescued, but as someone who rescued herself. That night, Clara and I sat on the balcony, city lights glowing below us.
Do you think I did the right thing? She asked. I didn't hesitate.
Yes, I said, because you chose peace. She leaned against me, and for the first time in our lives, neither of us felt like we were waiting to be sent back. We had built something real.
And it was ours.